Okay, so let us sort this out. We're going to talk about, we'll get a quick overview of science. So the idea that things are made up of tiny little things is an old idea, right? So this is where the word atom comes from. So it's Democritus came up with this idea that if you could peer into the tiniest parts of anything around you, you would start to see that there are these little building blocks. And so atom means, so A is as in nut, and tom, to cut, right? So you can't break anymore. Of course, there are quarks, whatever, but this idea that we get down to these little pieces. Not everyone was happy about this. Plato, as I have written here, wanted his books to be burned, which is a little harsh, but academics have obviously haven't changed really over a long period of time. So then you have the sort of development of chemistry and the emergence of the periodic table, which is what I have here in this little tarot card. People start to really see these these materials as being made out of different things, and there's sort of this developing idea, and there's all this kind of pattern, and of course we had, as I said, the periodic table. So that takes, there's several hundred years of that. I would say 300 years of what I would call the golden age of reductionism. And it's an enormous achievement, right? It's an enormous achievement. So we start to understand that matter is made up of these special little pieces. And then what's surprising about this is it's only really, it's into the 1900s before collectively we accept this. And Boltzmann, incredibly famous physicist, an absolute genius, thought that gases work like this, right? So he had a theory which was supposed built out of atoms and molecules, these little bits interacting and so on. Mark, who's famous for whose name is enshrined in going fastness, they didn't believe this, right? So there's a lot of arguing, and he I guess was his life ended terribly, and there's some suggestion that part of it was his frustration with the people around him. So it's important that he passed away in 1906. So this is 1904. He's at a conference where physicists didn't think atoms existed. Right? That was just not true, and they wouldn't let him into the physics section. He was put in this rather just disappointingly low caliber area called applied mathematics. And then he had a bit, I guess the story is he went on a bit of a rampage, right? So attacking philosophy and kind of using Lamarck's theory, right, of inheritance, right, that you would inherit things, which of course is true of cultural evolution, that people inherited bad philosophy. So I'm not sure if he said it was through the breeding, which of course these people were very much in the world of thinking about that the life that way. Anyway, so it was hard for scientists to overcome, or philosophers to overcome the bad things that had come before. And it is true of science in general. We get absolutely stuck on things, right? We were completely wrong about how the planets worked for thousands of years, and you could get yourselves into real trouble by talking about ellipses and the sun not being the center of the universe and all sorts of things, or the earth not being the center of the universe. Yeah, I mean that could end terribly. You could be persecuted and possibly burned at a stake. Right, so Boltzmann takes his own life, 1906. Then there's this other guy who's pretty smart, probably not a great human, but and it's unclear as to how much of it is he's smart anyway, but had a pretty good year. 1905, produced a lot of things, and that became quite famous. And so something about quantum, we'll leave all that aside, but he had this little paper about, so this is Einstein, had this paper about Brownian motion, the little things bumping into each other. Could explain this idea that was observed by Brown, and named after them. And again, you should never, this is just, we'll come back, you should not name anything after people. Just, that's my personal view, bad idea. So this kind of diffusion piece, and this is something we'll have some work on soon. Diffusion, where something kind of just starts to spread out and spread out and spread out. Right? So if you throw some different colored liquid into a clear liquid, you'll see it spread. It's complicated how that works. But this general idea of diffusion, and so this quite short paper showed that little ball bearings kind of bouncing off of each other could give rise to what was observed in terms of this diffusion process. And diffusion, famously, is a Gaussian distribution spreading out. Again, we'll get to that through random walks. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, which might help you with your gambling. Although I don't want to, sort of support that too much. Okay, so that's a theoretical piece that said, it could, if little things are bouncing off each other, then that would give this observed macro behavior. Profound. And then there's experimental work that's in 1908 by Perrin and colleagues that showed that this atomic theory worked. So that's 1908. So it's 112 years ago, and then really, in the next few years after that, that we, humans, start to say, oh, atoms exist. It's not long. So when we're talking about systems, we've only just gotten to the small component parts, the most very fundamental ones. We're still trying to sort all that out, and I know there's dark matter and whatever, and that's great for superhero origin stories and being confused about galaxies. But we'll see how that plays out. But as far as we're concerned, our cornflakes are made out of atoms, and that's where we are. So not long ago, but then of course we're going to start thinking about, well, how do systems work? Right now our atoms are, of course, the atoms, but also people, right? Interacting with each other. So Feynman, another one of these very bright people, possibly wasn't the nicest human, but this is what's the most profound thing. If you were allowed to send one sentence along to some sort of, this is the only piece of information you're allowed to communicate, I guess you'd have to communicate how language works and so on. But all right, let's just say you're allowed to have sort of one core thing. It would be that atoms exist, right? That things are made of atoms. Because it took us a long time to get to that. So little pieces that are just attracted in various ways, they stick together, they make molecules, remarkable. And so, as you said, so in that one sentence, so let's say, I believe it is the atomic hypothesis that all things are made of atoms. And in that one sentence, you will see there is an enormous amount of information about the world, if just a little imagination and thinking are applied. But yeah, Democritus was right, but and probably all these other unnamed people who thought about it for 3 seconds or maybe years and didn't write it down. We don't know about them. Someone 10,000 years ago probably thought about it, but went back to looking for food or something. But didn't write it down because that was not a thing, or did write it down and it got washed away by the sea the next day,